Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So today we are with the Grundo company team to speak about the way that satellite data can help with the monitoring of biodiversity. But before begin, I just wanted to remind you that there are some housekeeping during our webinar, like keep yourself muted during the presentations, and there will be a time for questions at the end of the meeting. And the webinar is of course recorded, so you could find it on our website. And we also have an online code of conduct, so you can read it quickly. But I just wanted to say that I am the guardian of this webinar, so if you notice anything, I don't know, contrary to our rules, please send an email to me. And then I think I can leave it to our speaker.
Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good night to everybody, depending from the place where you are now located. Yes, my name is Miller Mendoza. I'm a co-founder of Grundo. Grundo is a technology company that uses satellite images and also artificial intelligence in order to create some insights and extract data that can help us to protect our environment, also to help the public good, and also data for governments and other type of companies. So today, I got invited, thank you very much to Gosha and to Josephine. We got the invitation to give this seminar. The idea of this seminar is to talk a little bit about the satellite technology and how this could be used in this specific case, how to monitor and protect the biodiversity in our planet. So I will shortly then start sharing the presentation that I prepared for you. So I hope everybody is seeing the screen. Yes. Okay. So yes. So as I was saying, so in principle, so our goal or main goal is to really apply technology, and then according to the sustainability goals of the United Nations, so we are tackling like goals like zero hunger. So we really want to use technology in order that that all these problems that we face right now and like these challenging problems and the hardest problems that we face today, that we can actually solve them. So that's why today we are going to talk about how to use satellite technology into tackling and solving those issues. The topic of today is biodiversity. I think maybe most of you are familiar with biodiversity, but even though that's the case, so I would like to make a very fast review about what it is. So let's start by biodiversity is a mixture between biological and diversity, which means that we are talking how diverse is the biology in a place. For instance, how many type of genetical variation are in a single animal species. For instance, you know that if there is a eagle family or a hawk, yeah, you can have different type of genes for each of those animals, and this will create a genetic variety. And this we will see afterward why this is very important. Secondarily, it's also in terms of species. So we say that an ecosystem is diverse when there are a lot of species, different species. And also when there are like different ecosystems and different type of vegetables and animals. So in this case, for instance, we can see all the way up to down from the genetic case to the really ecosystem, there should be like a variety of biological traces or properties. Yeah, so even a single species should be genetically diverse. A single ecosystem should have like a different type of animals, different type of plants, as well as a biodiverse. Yeah, and then overall, the entire planet, yeah, has a biodiversity, let's say, variable. In this case, the idea is more like to also remember that within the most important ecosystem, we have the marine ecosystem, the forest, the desert, and the grasslands. And each of those, they possess a really, really different biodiversity trait. So that's why sometimes when there are these very big discussions at the government levels, they are always discussing how to measure the biodiversity in a quantitative way. And this always, and most of the cases, not an easy answer because every ecosystem has a different type of animals and plants. So you cannot really come up with a single measurement to measure biodiversity overall, let's say in the entire world. So that's why it's a bit challenging to come up with a single definition, but everybody knows exactly what it means and how people could protect it. So this is more or less like the importance of biodiversity at the level of the human discussions. So the importance of biodiversity, you can see it in this plot. So basically biodiversity is like this tower puzzle where there are like many components. And every time you destroy one of the components, basically the tower becomes a bit weaker. And then you remove another one and the tower becomes weaker until you remove one more and then the whole tower falls down. So this is more or less very similar to what happened in biodiversity. We can keep destroying it. Let's say we can keep cutting trees, make deforestation. We can keep, let's say, contaminating the waters. And nature is quite resistant to this kind of changes or with this kind of attacks. But at some point, changes will not be reversible, meaning that nature cannot come back to the origins. So some of the examples, for instance, that I have compiled here is that some of the impacts of biodiversity is to have a genetic diversity, which is important, for instance, for the fabrication of drugs in medicine. So let's say many viruses and bacteria, if we have a biodiverse ecosystem, we will have better samples to produce medicine, for instance. And so on. So also another example is, for instance, the clean water. So the water that we drink, as you know, this comes from clean water resources that comes, let's say, from the mountains. And we as a human, sometimes we don't take care of it, meaning that, for instance, if we keep emitting a lot of CO2 gases and then warming up the entire ecosystem or the entire atmosphere, so then, which is like the global warming. So in principle, what happens is that we end up melting the glacier.
You got mute. Sorry, you got muted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
now, yeah, okay, perfect, thank you. Yeah, and I think it was, I will just repeat a little bit before. So I was talking pretty much about the sources of the fresh water, meaning that if we, for instance, keep polluting the air and then the rise in the global temperatures, so then in principle, we are also melting the glaciers, and the glaciers are a source of clean water. So in this sense, if we don't protect the biodiversity, we will not have clean water in the future. Also, this is also one of the problems as well. So the other one is like, for instance, a speedy recovery from natural resources. This is like if, for instance, a forest right now catch fire by some natural, let's say, sources. In principle, it will restore itself automatically. But if the forest is not biodiverse and there is, let's say, one single species of plants, it may be that this catch fire and then it will never come back. So that's why it's very important to, in order to balance the ecosystem and for sustainability, to keep in mind the biodiversity is always a very important and crucial property that we really need to take care of. And this, as you can see here on the slide, also many others, which I'm not going to go into the details, like for instance, but maybe just name very roughly, like for instance, food security, yeah, adaptation to changes in the habitat, yeah, because let's say if there are different variety, a change in habitat will be less crucial. Let's say more animals and also humans per se, they could adapt faster if there is a diversity. Let's also, for the food security, let's think about agriculture. For instance, if you have one single crop with one single genetic structure or code, the thing is that it can come a disease and then, or a pest, and then kills all of them. But if there is a genetic diversity, it may be that this disease, when it comes, it will kill some of the crops, but not the entire crop. So in that sense, a biodiverse agriculture is key in order to ensure food security for the future and attack or be resistant against some pest or disease in the future. So that's some of the importance of keeping biodiversity. It's really not only up to just a problem of, let's say, of the environment, of the wild environment, but it's also really touching our human life. I mean, in the human life, we also have an impact if we don't protect the biodiversity. So some of the examples of how humans have been destroying the environment very slowly is by deforestation. Everybody always heard that, for instance, by the end of the year, sometimes there is a lot of fires in the Amazonas because there are new farmers that want to increase their land. Yeah, also there is illegal deforestation, for instance, where there is like the government assigns some type of land for agriculture, but then some people really burn more than that in order for, let's say, industrial purposes or to build a factory, etc. Poor waste management, that is also, we have seen it in many places in the world. Global warming, as I was mentioning, this could affect from all the way from glaciers to the water resources that we have for drinking water. So we have water pollution. So let's just remember that there has been a lot of studies that have found microplastic in water, and there is a large percentage, for instance, of the animal wildlife in the ocean that already have microplastic in their system. So, and this is really something that we should take care of, and then be careful about it and take some measurements. So the air pollution, so it's also a key factor. So especially when there are like uncontrolled biofuels, let's say factories, that they keep emitting and more air pollution, and there are no regulations. And this sometimes comes from the government level. And this is, I think, something that people should take care, took the initiative, and then talk to their governments in order to take an action. And finally, some land damage due to the same. It can be also erosion. It could be also for the waste of the waste management, yeah, and all the other factors. So one of the other examples, for instance, is that we can have like there are statistics that shows that up to 99% of all the temperate forest has been already destroyed, yeah, in order to construct cities. And this is mostly on the US data. And agriculture has also replaced nearly all of the grasslands in North America. So I think this is really like to have in mind some statistics, to have in mind what is the impact of the human behavior into the environment and how we are slowly destroying the biodiversity. So just to know that these are a couple of problems. And then what we are going to show here is some possible tools that technology has in order to monitor and to maybe also have an action to protect the biodiversity in the planet. So in this moment, or in this case, and this presentation, we are particularly going to talk about the satellite technology. Satellites are as everybody knows, they are basically devices orbiting around the Earth. Yeah, and there are many of them. But most important, there is like a consortium or a joint work between some space agencies, for instance, like NASA and ESA, and they have built a program that is called the Copernicus program. This Copernicus program has as a goal to be able to provide the technology required to monitor the Earth, and the water and the air. So basically the whole planet. So this is a plan that is supposed to talk about the Earth observation system. And for that, there are a couple of satellites that we can use to observe different properties. For instance, some from the family of the satellites, there is like the family of the Sentinels and also the Landsat satellite, et cetera, there are many of them. So we, in this talk, we are going to talk specifically about the Sentinels or the Copernicus program. So here there are, from this Copernicus program, there are Sentinels. These Sentinels, there are a couple of different type of satellites. And from these, we are going to talk only about Sentinel-2 and Sentinel-5P. And this is because with the data that Sentinel-2 provides is already enough to characterize the land where we live and the coastal waters. Let's say 20 kilometers from the coast where we live, we can also monitor properties using the Sentinel-2 data. I will explain later what is exactly what this satellite data carries as an information. Sentinel-5P, yeah, it's mostly in charge of measuring atmospheric air quality. So in this sense, so it carries on atmospheric sensors and is constantly measuring data as nitrogen oxide and also things like carbon monoxide and any other type of gases that are bad for the environment. So from these two satellites, so every time a satellite makes an orbit, so then we call it a revisiting to a place. So meaning that, for instance, Sentinel-2 has a 5 days of revisiting time, meaning that every 5 days will pass exactly on top of the same location. So we can have a frequency of every 5 days to monitor something. It provides a multispectral bands measurements, which I will explain in the next slide. And the Sentinel-5, it has a revisiting time of less than a day. So it means that if we want to monitor the atmospheric air quality or the air quality of a city, we can really do it on a basis that is less of a day. Yeah. And this doesn't mean that we need to take pictures from the satellite every, let's say, half a day. It just means that we have a lot of data on top of which we can create models. And with those models, we can actually measure the impact of those of this contamination, for instance, in other things. So it's just a lot of data that's being collected. This data is being collected constantly, so meaning that we don't need to ask for them in order to require. They are being collected and being stored in an open source database. And open source means that in principle everybody has access to this data. So the important thing is, like, let's say, even though this data is free and is available to everybody, the challenge is more about what do we gain from this data. So it's like, okay, we have all this data, which has a lot of petabytes. Yeah, but okay, so now what do we do with it? So the data is nice and all this stuff, but if we don't do anything or we don't process it in order to get some insights, yeah, we are not going to do anything. And this is something that we do here at Grundo. So at Grundo, we basically apply some technology. We use the satellite data, and then we apply tools like artificial intelligence. We also use some physical models in order to extract those type of important information from that satellite data. So here, for instance, now we are going to explain what is Sentinel-2 data. So Sentinel-2, a multispectral bands sensor. So that means that it measures different at different frequencies from the electromagnetic spectrum. So just to remind this is an example, for instance. So if you see below, there is the entire electromagnetic spectrum that can go from the cosmic rays, gamma rays, X-rays, until, let's say, radio wave and broadcast bands. So this is the entire electromagnetic spectrum. And as we know, the human eye only sees a small portion of it, so which is the visible spectrum, which is located here. And then there is composed by the violet light until the red light, going all the way the rainbow colors, basically. So this is important to just mention that when we measure the data from Sentinel, we get the blue, green, and red as the primary colors, but we also get extra data. We also get data in the infrared, and we also get data from the very, let's say, blue or violet extreme of the spectrum. So meaning that with satellite data, we can actually see more than what we can see with the naked eye. And this is very important because this is exactly the type of data that we need to extract some information that also we haven't seen with our eyes. So for instance, if we are going to see if a plant is green, we can just go there and check, and we will see, oh yes, the plant is green. But if we are going to check how healthy is that plant, yeah, so then if you have two plants that are green, it may be that one is healthy and the other one is unhealthy, but you may not be able to see it with the naked eye. But if you measure with a multispectral band sensor, that means that you may get information from the infrared of these two leaves or plants. And then from this infrared information, that you can actually determine that one of the plants are healthy and the other one is unhealthy. So this is the advantage of having the multi-band spectrum. It's like a superhuman eye. Yeah, you can see more than what you see. So apart from the spectrum or the electromagnetic wave, you also have some resolution, meaning that every satellite photo, it has a pixel size of 10 by 10 meters. This is like a standard resolution for Sentinel-2 data. This on the right, there is a photo. This is a photo really at 10-meter resolution per pixel. And then you can see that maybe you won't be able to identify a person, or maybe it's very hard to identify a car. Yeah, but you still see, for instance, agriculture fields. You can also see the forest, yeah, because they don't require like such a huge resolution. So this data to be for free is really amazing because you can really do a lot with it, at least at the large scale. Let's say citywide, countrywide, you can do a lot of things. Now, this technology, let's say for this 10 by 10 meter resolution, is only for the free data. Nowadays, there is also data that is commercial, but this costs now money, and this belongs to some companies, yeah, where they could go up to 30 centimeters per pixel. With that resolution, basically you are able to distinguish a car or a plane or any other objects. Yeah, but then again, no, it's expensive on one hand. On the other hand, it's more about if it's really needed for the use case. And I think for biodiversity, because it's a large scale problem, yeah, I don't think that is needed. So that's why I think low resolution at 10 meter resolution is sufficient for this job. So how do we use the technology? So now we said, okay, now we have the data, everything is there. So now we need to process it. So this is an example. How can you actually measure the health of the plants? This is known also as the normalized different vegetation index. And this is just an example that I'm going to give you. But for instance, other indexes like the soil fertility, how fertile is a soil for agriculture, for instance, yeah, plus detection of plastic solutions, they are computed in similar ways, in a little bit more complex way, but in a similar way of like building from the data of the bands and then using some equations in order to extract the data. For instance, here is how we do this. So this is, for instance, the absorbance spectrum of the chlorophyll. So the chlorophyll is in all the plants, as we know. So this is the response. So this means that every time there is, let's say, light that has these wavelengths and that hits on the plant, yeah, or on the leaves, it gets absorbed, for instance, at this wavelength or frequency. You can convert it one way or the other. So the same happens at this wavelength. So at this wavelength means that if there is some electromagnetic wave or photons or like light at this wavelengths, it will hit the leaves and then it will be absorbed. Yeah, so this is what is a spectrum, how it works. So the rest, for instance, if there will be an electromagnetic wave at 550, it won't be absorbed. So basically it's reflected. Yeah, so then that's why we will use this spectrum, and almost every substance in nature has a typical spectrum. So that's why it's very important. If we want to identify features from the environment, we can actually gain a lot by looking at the multispectral bands. So here, for instance, we can use the red wavelength, which is you typically use, that is somewhere here, and some infrared bands that are here. And then we basically can measure the relation between them. And by doing that, we can say, so what is the chlorophyll density? And because we know that there is a correlation between the chlorophyll density and the health of the plant, so then we can say, okay, if the chlorophyll density is high, so then probably the plant is healthy. If it's very low, so probably the plant is not healthy because it's the way they feed themselves to do photosynthesis. So this is an example on the right-hand side. As you see, this is the same image that we saw before. And then you see here a snapshot of the NDVI, how we call it here. So this is the relation, for instance, at the bottom, how you can construct this index to measure the health of the plant. And then here on the right, then you see really what happens. So how is the color scale? Meaning very red, very green means healthy. Very red, it means non-healthy. And then you can see already how it correlates from the image. And then you can already see, for instance, which parts has more vegetation than others as well. So that's why, for instance, if you are a farmer and you have a crop, you can also use this index to say, okay, this part of the crop is not growing so well. This one is growing better. Yeah, if you are, for instance, studying deforestation, so then you can say, okay, this part, it was full of forest before, but now has been removed. So then you can follow and monitor deforestation. So this is just to give you a couple of examples and models that you can use to do that. Another index that we have built, and this we built after some research that we did, it was to make a biodiversity estimate. So this how we did that is following the fact that if we have a spectral band, let's say we have all this information for every pixel in the image, we can actually study how diverse are those values. Because we already saw before that every single substance, mostly, they have a very specific spectrum. Yeah, it's like a fingerprint. And then what happens is when all these fingerprints are diverse, there are many because there are many species, because there are many things going on there. So then this will be reflected in the diversity of the spectral bands. So which means that if we measure the diversity of these spectral bands, so then we will have a correlated value that will give us a quantitative measure of the biodiversity of the place. So this is more or less like the scientific model behind. And please don't hesitate to ask questions in a way that that if you don't understand anything, just type the question on the chat, yeah, and then we can go and answer them in the end without any problems, because some of these models may seem sometimes complicated, but they are not that complicated. So just let us know. So this is an example. For instance, we take the image, we take a point on that image, and then we measure the surrounding pixels or pixel informations. And then we reconstruct a distribution and a statistical distribution, as you see at the bottom, for all the bands. For each of them, for each of the bands, we have this distribution. And then in that way, we can actually apply statistical methods to see how uncorrelated they are, how diverse they are, how basically random they are. And the more the random, the more biodiverse. Yeah, so here, so for this case, so for instance, we have a photo of the Amazonas. This is just an example where you see that blue is very biodiverse, red is less biodiverse, and then we just make a map. Yeah, so we took the Amazons because if you go to the rainforest, we should be able to see blue. Yeah, and if we go to any other places in a city, for instance, we will be mostly seeing red. So it's just like a way to, let's say, attest or validate, at least even qualitatively, our model. Because as we mentioned before, a single definition of biodiversity is very difficult to get because it depends on ecosystem, it depends on latitude, depends on everything. So then at least by this, we have a quantitative measurements that is based just on statistics and the satellite and the spectral information of the environment. So this is like the correlated case. So in this case, for instance, we can use this tool, yeah, to generate sustainability agriculture products for pest control, improvement of genetic diversity, because if we see that something is not biodiverse, then this means that if there is a plague or a pest, we'll just wipe out everything without protection. Yeah, so that's really important to keep a biodiverse genetic of the plants, for instance, for agriculture. And also for the pharmaceutical companies, it's really important to have a biodiversity in order to make medicines. So on the other hand, for the environment, we can always monitor the deforestation, flora and fauna, and also to protect natural parks. And this is also very important. So for instance, we know that many countries, they are now trying to impose some stronger measurements to protect natural parks. And then we can actually use satellite data, and they are using satellite data to kind of control that, to monitor that there is nothing illegal going on, that everything is under control, and that their natural reserves are being protected. So this is just some of the use cases that we can come up by using these symbols. So, and just let's say to finish the set of like use cases here. So what we are going to say is that, for instance, this is a pollution example. We can measure different types of pollutions, like we mentioned before. With Sentinel-5, we can measure the air quality on a city, as you see here below. This is an example of Santiago de Chile, the capital of Chile, yeah, where you see some data from 2020, and then you see that really in the center, there is a larger emission of nitrogen oxide than on the countryside, as you would expect, right? But the thing is more like if you monitor these levels, because we can actually measure the concentration, we can always we can always check that the levels are under control, that they are not really like destroying the entire ecosystem and the entire sustainability, because that's the important thing. So by our daily life, we will of course emit some polluting gases, but the idea is that those polluting gases, they can be counterattacked by some natural reserve, let's say trees that can convert carbon dioxide into oxygen, and then we can emit, like the whole cycle of life is kept, like the whole cycle of the carbon dioxide is kept in neutral. So this is the idea, not to exceed on the emissions in order to destroy the environment. So with Sentinel-2, we have seen the other two examples on the right. So here is an example, this is in Colombia, where we have seen this is close, the city is called Barranca Bermeja. There is an oil company there, and then in this lake here, there was a few years ago a scandal because there was a lot of plastic on the water. And then we decided to go there and then to use our tools in order to measure plastic pollution. And then we can really correlate and say, yes, by that date, more or less, there were a lot of plastic, yeah, swimming on the water, yeah, and then we can really like maybe become activists. That's the idea. So at least to inform the people, or the governments, or our governments, not to take an action, because we need to protect the biodiversity. On the right hand, so we have also an oil spill in Mauritius. So this is another use case that we can speak about. For that, we have also developed a tool that can detect this kind of hydrocarbon pollutants, yeah, on the water. And this is the case of Mauritius, where there was a tank that it was that collides with a coral reef, and then it generates a flooding of all this all the oil that had inside, and then this creates a natural catastrophe basically. And in that sense, so this was really like it took many weeks to be clean. And then we can also even follow the process by using the tool. We can see how this process is being conducted. Yeah, also as a monitoring case in case we need to take an action. So I hope that this all helps you to give an idea of what is the potential use of the technology in order to protect the biodiversity. In this case, satellite technology plus some other analytical methods and scientific methods. So now what I'm going to ask you is that, for instance, you can go to this link that is below. If you go to that link, you can have access to the demo platform. You may need to register there. But once you are registered, so then you can check for all these properties that I have just mentioned before, yeah, in order to get an idea. And for that, I will show you an example. The second link for the biodiversity index, this one, I would ask you to maybe do it one by one, because this one is more computationally expensive. So if all of you goes at the same time for the biodiversity index, it may take forever to get some results. But at least the first one, you can really use it. After registration is for free. You can really use it. There is some limitation on the polygon size. Yeah, so I will show you an example how this would work. So this is an example of the demo platform. So here, let me just. So here you register. And then once you are here, for instance, I have prepared an example case. I mean, in principle, I will explain a bit later what is all this dashboard. But first, I will just copy the information that I have of a specific location. Okay. So for instance, here, if you are seeing my screen, so then you will see that I'm focusing on this area. Yeah, this is an area that I pre-select, of course, because I did a little bit of research before coming to the seminar. But you can always play everywhere. You can just draw polygons everywhere, wherever you want, and then make your own case study. So here, for instance, I will request what is here. This is what is called the land. Land is all the land properties that you can see. So then I will make a small request here. And then, and this is basically what we are doing is requesting data from the, let's say, the final date is the 1st of July of 2020. And then I'm requesting data 30 days before that date. So it's a range. So the command that it says, or the variable that is days is the range. So meaning that in the end, I'm requesting satellite data from the 1st of June until the 1st of July of 2020. So this parameter here is the maximum cloud coverage that I'm willing to take. For instance, usually if you take satellite images, sometimes there are a lot of clouds, so you cannot see the ground. So maybe you don't need that. So then you can be more specific, right, on the type of like cloud coverage that you allow as maximum, yeah, in order to be retrieved from the system. And the mode is whether you want the image within that range within the 30 days that you are requesting, meaning from the 1st of June to the 1st of July, the least cloudy or the latest, because there will be many, many images on that range, but you need to decide which one is your priority, either the one with the least clouds or the one that has been the most recent one. And this depends on the use case. One has the larger priority than the other one. So here we got the results already for 2021. I will request for 2021 because I want to show you how deforestation has impacted this region. So I will take a satellite image from 2021 and another image from the same region of 2020. So here I can see a lot of things, but I will focus now from the satellite layer. So this one is, for instance, the satellite image that you see when you see it on the 1st of July. Yeah. So now if you see here, there is already a lot of farms. Then you see here, because you recognize the structure of the farms, there are a few clouds here. Yeah. Here, for instance, there is still like some, I mean, this is already like farm type, meaning that there is no dense forest anymore there. And I would like you to really like focus on this region, because if we go, let's say a few years ago, you would see that here there was a dense forest. Yeah, so this is we are going to do afterwards. So at the moment, just also focus on the satellite layer, which is this one. So I'm just here with this one, I can control the transparency of the layer, yeah, for the recent satellite image. If I want to check the health of the vegetation, so then I will just put the other layer. So here, for instance, red means that it's very healthy, and very dark blue means that it's non-healthy. And then here you see, for instance, that the very dense forest, which is on the right here, is way much reddish, yeah, that if you focus in a region where there is a farm. And this says already how dense is the vegetation. So that's why you can really follow some type of deforestation, at least with time, everywhere in the world. And also you can also see at last, you can also see the fertility layer, where you can have an idea how fertile is the soil. Yeah, so here, for instance, you see that here in this region, even if it's a farm-like, it's still more fertile than this region. As you can see here, for instance, this place here is more fertile than this one, because the brown color has a higher fertility than the green color. So then these are the type of studies you can do by using the technology. And now, just to give you an example of the time series then, so this one is the place where it has been cut, I mean, the trees has been cut. And then if I go, for instance, in 2017, yeah, and request the same layer, we will see that in this region, there will be still some dense forest. And this gives us already an idea that, let's say, in the last 5 years, there was a loss of the rainforest in the Amazonas. Yeah, here, for instance, you see this image. This is an image that is in 2017. And then you can see here that really you see now there is a forest. And if you indeed, let's say, increase the vegetation layer, so now you see here as dense as here, meaning that there was rainforest and now there is none. So I think this is really like a very nice tool. Here you can also check other things, like for instance in water, you can check this is for the plastic pollution. This is for the oil spills in principle, if we go to the water and then we make a request, etc. But I will let you play with it. So I just gave you an introduction of how the tool works. So feel free to go register and make the, let's say, request and play a little bit around. So the idea is that we create some movements that help us to protect the environment. So sort of activism. So here we come back to here. So for instance, let's continue with the presentation. So here are the 2 examples. Now one on the side of the other. So this one is an image of 2017, where you see like there is still forest here. This is the image in 2021, where you see that the forest here is gone. Also, all this part at the north. So you see that here in 2021 now is mostly used for agriculture. Here there was still a dense forest. So I think these are like very nice ways to monitor to inform whoever authority is in charge of it. And then if you think that something is, let's say, unfair in terms of protecting the environment, you can always talk to the proper, let's say, entities in order to fix those issues. Because I think in the end, protecting the biodiversity is a task for everybody, because we all breathe the same air. So it's not at the country level, but it's really at the global level. So with that, I would like to share very quickly. This is a video. We share this tool with many people let's say in Colombia at the moment. And in Colombia, for instance, there were already some kids that they were becoming activists, and they actually use our tools to make some videos. I think you can all see the video completely. Let's say when you are on your house or at your place of work.
We cannot hear that, so it's only like, yeah, okay.
For instance, here I will. So in the end, I just wanted to say that you can all watch the video. Like I think the link is posted now on the chat. Yeah. So in principle, so the idea is that you all watch the video and then to also have an idea that the type of projects that one can pursue also with kids, know that they may be also very interested in using this kind of technology to become somehow the voice of nature. Yeah, and in that way that they also participate in taking care of the environment. So not only the adults, but also the kids. So just to finish and to close the presentation. So just to conclude, so the idea is that we can use really the technology that we have at hand, in this case, satellite data and other scientific models, in order to monitor and protect the environment. And these are mostly, let's say, can be used for tasks like the biodiversity protection, to monitor air pollution, measure the vegetation health, monitoring deforestation, water contaminants, the detection of those, and also to measure some sources for the climate change. So let's say some factories that maybe are contributing too much into the global warming, etc. So you can all use these technologies and the scientific methods to track these type of things. And then just at last, so we would like to thank you for your audience also for listening to us, for participating in this seminar. This is the Grundo team, so Franco, Alan, Diana, and myself. So we have been working on this project. Then we are open for questions, and also I hope you are also enjoying the demo platform. If you have any questions, please write it in the chat. Also, if you have any question about the demo platform, you can write it on the chat, but if you try it later, don't hesitate to write us email or anything if you have any question, and then we are very happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this very good presentation. As less than 50 minutes remaining, I think some participants have questions in the chat, like if you go to the top of the chat, maybe Miller, you can answer some questions. I don't know if you saw them.
Yes, I'm seeing them now. Yes, I think I can answer a few of them, probably all of them. So yeah, so let's go to the first question: are the technology used through ArcGIS? Yeah, so basically ArcGIS is kind of like a software, and they also use this type of satellite data. They use satellite data from the Copernicus, from Sentinel, but they can also process data that is high resolution also from commercial sources. Yeah, so in the end, we are all using the same data. The difference mostly is the type of analytics that you put on top of that data to get some insights. For instance, the plastic detection tool, they don't have it in the ArcGIS, yeah, because this is built in-house here in Grundo. Or for instance, other tools like some crop classification for agriculture and other things, you won't find them on those softwares, yeah, but you can still find them on our demo platform because of the models and research that we have been developing in the last years. Can we identify forest species? Yes, I mean, in principle, we have been working on a crop, let's say for agriculture, we have been using artificial intelligence to detect the type of crops, meaning that we are able to detect, let's say, when there is corn, when there is wheat, or when there is, let's say, some kind of forest, or like in general. But I think like if we are going to forest species, so then I would say, as long as we have the data to train the neural network to be able to detect those, it should be possible, because in the end, all these species of the forest, they have a different spectral response, and therefore we can really distinguish them from the data. We just need to build the model for this specific case, but we have done it for agriculture before. With this next question is, with high density canopy cover like in Amazon, how we can estimate the diversity? I think the idea is really like how, because in the end, you have to think like how the spectral information is diverse. So what we do is to measure the entire spectral information. Some of the infrared bands, they can actually penetrate the canopy, yeah, because they don't basically, they can go through the leaves. So in principle, we just need to know how diverse they are. But I agree that it's a challenging topic, meaning that it may be that it's just an estimate, but it's not very accurate in that case. So that's why this field is still full of challenges. It's still full of developing new technologies, let's say new theories that can be used this data to get some insights. So this is like an ongoing process. Every time there is new theories, there is new advances. So we can keep an eye on it. Yeah, okay, so what kind of pollution affects the air the most? I think this is a difficult question somehow. So I would say the following. Let's say any type of uncontrolled pollution is bad, let's say. So if we all emit, let's say when we breathe, we all emit CO2, right? But we do it in a balanced way, meaning that if there are enough trees or plants in nature to transform that into oxygen and create a cycle that will bring balance, then it's okay. But if we start like producing too much of it, so then it's like when we break the balance and then we create a problem on the planet. For instance, I could say maybe it's, for instance, the energy industry, but the thing is that, or maybe not, or maybe it's the for instance, it's the methane emitted by all the, let's say, the meat products, right? But in the end, it's really like none of these products are bad unless you are really breaching this balance in nature. So it's really hard to say, it's really hard to answer what is the one that pollutes the most. I think every person in different industries, they will have their own definition, yeah, of what is polluting the most the earth. So I think this will be more about what is your view, yeah, on that topic, and what do you consider that pollutes the most, and what do you think it could be an action to take a responsibility for it? So I think this will be more on that direction. Okay, the next question, I think, I'm not sure, it says, can you tell everybody to put their Insta name to be friend? I think this is probably, I don't know this question. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I think this is.
Yeah, at the end, there is a question about this example of students' projects.
Yes, okay, yes, it says there are two, if this technology can detect daily routines of humans in the forest to combat or resolve timber poaching. Well, this is, I think we will need to have a look at this specific case, but prevalent not daily, because the satellite revisiting, for instance, for the Sentinel-2 is every 5 days. So I think at most it will be every 5 days monitoring. But I think if the use case, it really deserves to go to high resolution data, probably yes, then it can be used daily. But then it will carry a cost, right? Because then you may need to collect daily high resolution satellite data. And the question is if it's cost effective, right, to fight this, or maybe there are other ways to do it in a lower cost to fight the same problem. And the last question is, do you have an example of how these satellites data maps have been used for a students project or educator to discuss conservation issues? So this one is really much about the video that we showed before. So in principle, we have a small project in Colombia where we have there a partner, in Ciencia Local, it's called the partner, and they are actually going into schools and also universities to teach children how to use the satellite tool in order to monitor their environment. And in that case, for instance, the example that you saw before, it was a kid on a school in Bogota that she was asked to make a project, and then he chose that project in satellite data. And then in that way, so basically, they managed to create a very beautiful video about how to protect the coral reef. And then they supported it with satellite information, meaning that they make photos of the satellite data. And then they were actually checking how you could see that we are destroying the coral reef, also like the Great Coral Reef in Australia, and also in some regions in close to San Andres, which is an island in Colombia. So I think this is we have been doing that. So I think this is one of the examples. There are other kits that have also used the satellite data, but we don't have a video to show, but we just know that they have been working on those projects.
Okay, I see that there is a new last question, 5 minutes remaining. So this is really the last question. And yeah,
Thank you very much, Josephine. Yes, so the last question is, how about for wildlife? Is the technology can identify wildlife in the forest? Well, let's say inside the forest, probably it's very difficult, because if it's a dense forest, it's very difficult to see the animals below, or for instance, if it's any type of animal below that dense forest. But we do know that there are, for instance, projects that they detect, for instance, elephants when they get out from the dense, let's say from some forest to the grasslands, for instance. You can count them, and then you can actually check that they are there. It really depends on which type of wildlife, and also how dense is the forest. If the forest is not that dense, so maybe yes, but you have to think like we are watching from the sky. So everything like clouds, or like if the forest is too dense, it will forbid us to see below the canopy. So that's one of the limitations of the satellite images.
Okay, thank you again. It was really interesting, and thank you everyone for your participation and your attention. And if you want to watch in your time this webinar, we recorded it and it will be available on our website, Bioreader Global. And yeah, thank you and have a good day all. Bye.
Thank you very much to everybody also for participating in this webinar. And just as I said before, please feel free to just ask questions if you have some. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a fantastic presentation. I really enjoyed, and I hope it will be useful for many schools to use as a tool, and for anyone who was participating in this webinar. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.